And we are recording this, and just so you know, we will be posting this on YouTube and on our website and in our social media channels. So looking forward to this conversation. And this is the last, you are our batting cleanup in our series of conversations with the mayoral candidates hosted by the Growth Collective. And so we welcome you this afternoon. And this has been a series of conversations to talk about how we take a different lens to development here in Philadelphia, and one that is really going to accrue to the benefit of the Black and Brown and other marginalized neighborhoods. And so before we get into the conversation, and you'll be given an opportunity to do an opening statement, we have some questions for you, and then we'll have some time at the end if there are any questions from folks who are listening to put into our chat. And then you'll have an opportunity for a closing statement. So that's kind of what the game plan is, and we're going to try to get it all in about 45 minutes. And just by way of beginning, just to give you a little background on the Growth Collective, you may know a little bit about us, but about 3.5 years ago, my partners, Steven Sanders, Taib Smith, and I came together with a group of experienced Black developers. There were 7 development companies in all, who were all distressed about what we saw was going on in what, from our history here in Philadelphia, most of us were lifelong Philadelphians, watching the disintegration of core Black middle class and working class neighborhoods. And there were a variety of factors contributing to that: neglect and disinvestment and redlining and poor urban renewal policies. All of them were factors. And then putting on top of that, the recent pressures of gentrification meant that we saw home ownership going down. We saw our neighborhood business corridors really in decline. And the overall fabric of these neighborhoods and of the residents was really being damaged. And so it was our contention that many of the other ills that we are concerned about are rooted in the fact that we're losing a sense of place for many of our residents, and that there needed to be a response to that. And our approach is that real estate can be a powerful tool to reset that dynamic, that in the right hands, culturally competent developers with the adequate investments, you can really use real estate to transform the issues around wealth and the health and the well-being of residents instead of displacing them. And so bringing in advocates who are working in the public and private sector, along with capital investments in the hands, again, of developers who have the cultural competency and the commitment to investing in these communities, we believe it's a viable strategy. And so that's really what the Growth Collective has been engaged in for the last 3.5 years. So we're very concerned about having leaders on the second floor and the 4th floor of City Hall who understand that approach and are to it and have strategies about how it can be advanced. And so that's really the context of our conversation today. My partner, Taib Smith, will be joining in a minute. He's coming back from another engagement. And so between the two of us, we're going to spend the next roughly 20 to 30 minutes with you with some questions. And then, like I said, take some questions from our chat. So before getting into our questions, wanted to give you about 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes for your opening statement. And then we'll go into our Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Sandra. It's wonderful to be here today with the Growth Collective to have a conversation around these really important issues that you've just framed. I'm running for mayor because I deeply care about our city, and I believe that I'm the right person to lead our city forward in this critical moment. I've spent the last 15 years working for the residents of our city. Hi, Taim. Close to a decade with 2 different mayors, and the last 5 as the independently elected city controller. I know the city's finances. I know the city's budget inside and out from being the budget director. I've managed 1,000 employees as the chief administrative officer and gotten things done. And I've called out the operational issues as the city controller and put forth thoughtful recommendations to move our city forward. But that's where my power ended as controller. As mayor, I can make these changes happen. And I think right now we need a mayor with the right experience and courage to lead us forward. On the issue specifically of a sense of place and the displacement of African-American communities and businesses. This is something that is very important to me and will be under my administration, because we have to make sure that our whole city is truly healthy and vibrant and growing. That means increasing the number of Black-owned businesses. That means stopping displacement of long-time residents from areas that are gentrifying. And I have plans for this, specific plans that we can talk about for the next 40 minutes, and really changing the city's service delivery, from trash pickup to 911 response time. All of these things that as controller, I called out the inequities in service delivery by neighborhood, by race, that we need to strategically and intentionally fix, and that will need a disruption of city government to make that happen. And that is what I plan to do as mayor, to make our city truly work for everyone, so that trash pickup is on time in every neighborhood, so that 911 response times are good in every neighborhood. And I know that gets a bit off of the topic of development as a tool, and I look forward to this conversation, but I do think it's all part of the bigger issue, which is how do we have a government that truly works for everyone, and that works for the African-American communities of our city. So I look forward to the conversation, and thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, Rebecca. And it's not off topic at all, because the reason we're doing what we're doing is really about quality of life. And real estate, using real estate as a means, as we said, as a tool to do that. But there are many other levers that are important. And so the whole purpose of this is, at the end of the day, how is all of the residents have the opportunity to thrive? How do our residents have an opportunity to thrive? So that's the backdrop. Our approach is through real estate as a tool, but as a mayor, you would have a lot of levers. It's good to know how you would be using them. And so Taib, welcome. Glad you're in place now. I don't know if you want to jump in before we get into the questions of the day, just as we're opening.
Yeah, I'm going to skip an opening statement. I think we should jump into the questions. I just wanted to say thank you for making the time. I know this has been an exhausting election cycle, and a very most competitive election I can think of in my adult life in Philadelphia. So my first question is, what policies would your administration implement using real estate as a vehicle to benefit predominantly Black neighborhoods versus displacement of low-income and middle-class Black taxpayers, which seems to be the norm in urban planning?
So I put forth a housing policy, housing plan that's on my website, rebeccaforphiladelphia.com. And what I envision doing is, first, using the city-owned 8,500 vacant properties and lots in a very strategic and intentional way to create affordable housing. The city owns the solution to a big part of the new affordable housing need, in the sense that we own all these vacant properties and lots. And as city controller, I actually had my office map some of that, so I could drive through it to see what we actually owned. And it really does need to be put to use. I plan to have a citywide housing policy that I develop working with council members, but I think that the land use planning has been too focused on being sort of patchwork, and that there does need to be an overall citywide process and plan developed by the mayor, which is the way that I intend to go about it. In terms of how do we create development that doesn't displace? Two parts of my plan are specifically focused on this, which is that the city has programs to keep longtime residents in their homes. The longtime owner occupied program and the senior tax freeze. Now we can talk about changes to those programs to add so that there's higher income thresholds. But right now, most longtime homeowners don't even know about those programs, because the city doesn't do outreach. The city puts it on their website and assumes older people go to the city's website, which is just ludicrous because that doesn't happen. So what my plan is to have outreach and to do door knocking. I think that we do it for elections. Why does the city government never do this to help people? And that's what I think we need to do. Go to areas that are gentrifying, areas where we're seeing significant increases in property taxes. We should be knocking doors and helping older individuals stay in their homes, right? It's on the city government to make sure that communities stay intact. And that has not been the case in the past. And to me, that's part of the responsibility of the city of Philadelphia's mayor and government is we have to create community health. And the base of community health is to have people that can grow old in their community and that you have multi-generations in the same community. And that's what I would work towards. Additionally, I think we need to look at rent subsidy as well as a way to keep people in their neighborhoods when there's gentrification, to keep African-American communities in the communities that they have been in for decades in our city. It's not right what's happening across our city. And in addition to that, I want to look at business legacy grants. Business legacy grants are a tool that's been used by San Francisco and a few other cities to keep longtime businesses, African-American businesses in their business corridors. It's a way to stabilize a business corridor. So we haven't done that here. And we're seeing the businesses, the longtime African-American businesses get pushed out of the business corridors. The business legacy grant is a good way to do that. So that also is another tool that is on my radar. And I think we should be looking at doing. Our end goal, and under my administration, my goal will be that we need to stabilize communities and then have our middle-class African-American communities be thriving, instead of seeming to be a force of destruction, which the city government often is, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you for that thorough response. And we'll hone in on another piece of that, or a piece of what you talked about, Rebecca, and that's around the land bank.
Okay.
In my next question about this, you mentioned the number of parcels that are under the city's control in the land bank. So one question is, do you see the land bank as a vehicle to do what you just spoken of? If so, you know, how do you see it working? If not, how would you move differently in terms of better using the city-owned properties to carry this out? And I'll add another piece to that. You talked about affordable housing, and a lot of people use that term affordable housing. Can you define what you mean by affordable housing as you think about the city strategy and what's missing?
Sure. So affordable has a technical definition, but I think we need a much wider range of what is affordable housing. So whether it is, 60% of AMI, 50%, 40%, 30%, we need to have different levels of what is affordable and not just go by the technical definition from the federal government, because that is not affordable to most people in our city. And the way that we can actually create affordable housing at different levels is the city can subsidize the mortgages. So there's interesting tools involved in this field where the city could use a portion of the American Rescue Plan money that the city received or housing trust money to pay down the mortgage. Let's say a house is built that's worth $250,000. The city could pay down that mortgage so that the mortgage is only $100,000, which would be about $1,000 a month in a mortgage payment. If the city wanted to create a home ownership program with a mortgage payment of $800 a month, then we would just have, as the city would have to put a little bit more into it to get that mortgage payment down. But that's the type of tool that could really increase first-time Black home ownership. And to me, it also, if you get back to sort of the history of why our housing ownership is so unequal, because white families in the 30s, 40s, and 50s were given the opportunity to get these federal home loan mortgage guarantees that Black families couldn't get. This is, well, if we're going to increase Black home ownership, then we need to be intentional around it in a way that helps provide that equity that white families got back, before in the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s. So that's my thought process on that. In terms of the land bank specifically, I think it could be done through the land bank. The only thing is that it's gotten so sort of mired down in like the process has not been with speed. There's so many different entities involved in the land bank, so many different entities, and even in terms of the city, and then there's the council person. And so I think all of those, we really need to look at it. And I've once seen sort of a process mapping of how long it takes, and it's crazy. It's like a spaghetti map. And so we have to look at the process of this and just really get to the crux of, if we want to get X number of properties through this a year, then what do we need to do to get there? And how do we make it actually work in the way it was intended to? Because theoretically, it's a really good concept, in my view. It's just about operationalizing it and making it work.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. So my next question, I'm going to frame with some statistics before I ask the question. Right? And Black and Hispanic real estate developers represent 0.5%, 0.56% of the total number of private U.S. developers and only 5% of owners in the real estate industry, according to a new study. The study estimates that 112,000 private real estate developers nationwide. Of that, 447 are Black and 175 are Hispanic, right? And I will also add that we have a 10x differential between household income or household wealth between Black and white families in the United States, all attributed to the intergenerational policies that you mentioned. So with that level setting, how would you propose to use city-owned assets and procurement contracts in order to diversify our real estate ecosystem in the region?
So on the procurement side, so wait, is the question specifically how to diversify? Repeat the, can you
So
repeat
the question is basically, how do you propose to use our city-owned assets, so like the land,
Yeah.
and then also our procurement contract as a city with a $6 billion annual budget that, and 40% of the city is African-American, 0.3% of the businesses are Black owned. How can the city work in partnership to create shared prosperity?
Yes, thank you. So my goal on procurement, and this is part of my economic growth policy that's up on my website, is that under my administration, I will have a goal for city contracting that 40% of city contracting goes to minority-owned businesses. That's not women. I'm not talking about women. We got to, what we have to focus in on is increasing the percent of our contracting that goes to Black-owned business, minority-owned business. The way to do that, how do we do that, right? So what my plan is twofold. First, to have the Office of Economic Opportunity report directly into the mayor's office. Right now it's in the Commerce Department, and I've seen from working for 10 years under two mayors that the Office of Economic Opportunity often doesn't have the staffing level it needs. It doesn't have the teeth that it needs in terms of to actually in a robust manner push the agenda of we have to increase the percentage of our procurement that's going to Black-owned business to uplift and grow, because we have this huge tool, right? The city itself has a tremendous lever to pull or push to do this. So 40% of city contracting. I also envision that My administration will provide technical assistance if needed, but this is also about making sure that as a city, we change things so that small businesses can enter into contracts with us as the city. When I was the chief administrative officer, for 1 year, I had procurement under me. And I worked with the African American Chamber of Commerce to identify what the pain points were for small African American owned businesses to do business with the city. And what we heard loud and clear was that the bonding requirements and some of the other requirements, as well as the length of time to get paid, it was taking over 150 days for a vendor to get paid by the city. And so this is a multi-departmental issue in the city. There's 17 approvals that are needed with different city departments in order to approve a contract. So, that's what holds up the payment, right? Is that the work starts and then the contract still has to get conformed, and it sits in all of these inboxes over this length of time. I could talk about this for a long time because it's ridiculous. So I worked with all of these departments to pull them together, cut the length of time significantly, but not all of the departments reported to me. As mayor, this would be a big initiative. We've got to shorten the time it takes to pay. We have to make sure that bonding financial requirements are such that small businesses can do business with the city. And then we have to go out and actively make sure that the businesses have the technical support they need. Additionally, I have a goal to double the number of Black-owned businesses under my leadership, under my administration, so that our percent of Black-owned business at least mirrors that of cities such as Atlanta, Charlotte, and Baltimore, who those cities have much more robust, sizable African-American owned business sectors. And so I think we need to use the equity, that power. Please. Oh, sorry.
She just said 30 seconds to the next question.
Okay, sorry. So we need to be very intentional about also putting in cash, putting in an equity into Black-owned businesses to help them grow. And I think we should be using either American Rescue money or Housing Trust money, or a different pot of money to do that.
Thank you.
Great. And so, Rebecca, you kind of hit on my next question, which was really focused on growing Black businesses here in the city. And just one piece of that that you may want to address is there's a lot of times people's perception that when we talk about Black businesses, we're talking all the time about small businesses. These are folks that are just getting started or barely getting started. And what we've been hearing from our developers, who these are all experienced and mature businesses, is really moving from small to mid-size and mid to significant size, where they find themselves really stymied, if you would. That the opportunities are very limited. They're not thought of, because they're Black businesses, they're not thought of as being real businesses or just businesses, and are always kept in, as Taibbi talks about it, as a remedial category. And so when you think about your strategies around business growth, particularly Black businesses, how would you address that so that you're not being kept in grade school, that there really is some ladder to grow as a business, as a Black-owned business, just like with others?
Yeah, so I think on that front, we likely need, as a city, need to be making sure there's sort of a mid-tier available of contracting. Because often what you're describing is there's these sort of big primes or big ones, and then there's ones the city views as smaller, and then you can't get out of your characterization, which is not right. And that would be also the role of a stronger Office of Economic Opportunity, working in conjunction with the mayor's office to identify small business that could sort of be the next stage of medium business, to be the next stage of large contracting, and to be intentional around making sure that the city is actually providing some technical guidance to those businesses and making sure that the contract sizes at the city level aren't just big and very small. So that's part of it, is that the city needs to break up some contracts in order to create that middle tier of business, if that is clear, if that makes sense to you.
Makes sense. Thank you for that.
Thanks.
Yes. So my next question comes from some folks from the Economy League. Philadelphia's Black population is declining and income growth for Black households is stagnant. White and Asian and Latino households' median income grew by 22% or more, while Black incomes grew by less than 6%. As the city's chief executive officer, what is your specific plan to close the income gap in public and private sectors?
Mhm. So we need as a city to create more job opportunity, good paying job opportunity, and get at the root cause of the inequity, which is the education system. So long term, that is the goal, right? That my daughter is in 7th grade in the public school system. Every kid deserves a good school. And right now we're not providing a good school to every kid in our city. And that will be a top priority of mine. And we need to make sure that everyone has a good school to go to, and that adults also have good job training for the good paying jobs in our city. And so that is a key part of my plan to increase opportunity and get people out of poverty, to get income growth from the African-American community, in the African-American community, as well as across our city. We also just need to make our city safer. And this gets to public safety and why people are leaving our city. Sorry, Mayor Street is outside my door waving at me, so my apologies to that.
We said
So we need to create a city where people feel safe, and I think we're seeing the result of neighborhoods that aren't safe, schools that aren't good enough, and we're losing our Black middle class, and that's not okay. That's not acceptable to us as a city. So I think we need to fix the school system, which probably is a whole nother conversation, but I have a very detailed plan around that. Make sure I'll be a strong fighter at the state level to get more funding for our schools, and make sure that we have an increase in the number of good seats, whether they be traditional public or charter. We need good seats right now. We need good paying jobs. So I will create job pathways from all of our neighborhoods into good paying jobs. And then through my administration's initiatives around growing Black owned business, around entrepreneurship, that will also bring about a lot more good paying jobs, income growth, career growth. I mean, that's what we need to see. So it's all of those different pieces working together.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I have to say, I appreciate your comment about our public schools. I get extremely frustrated about the conversation pitting traditional public schools against public charter schools.
Yeah.
And have spent a whole lot of time around this issue of school reform and making our schools better. Parents are just looking for high quality schools, and they are using the system to the best of their ability. A charter school one year, a traditional school the next year, wherever they believe their child can get a good education. And if we don't, as leaders in this space, understand that you need a whole system that works together, it is, to the detriment. So thank you for saying that. And, that's something I care a lot about and have spent a whole lot of time thinking about. Moving back to our issue of the day around real estate, and this is a question that I'm going to ask you to start with a yes or no response, and then you can expand on it. There's been a lot of criticism of the tax abatement program. A lot of people say we need to kill it altogether. Others who've said, well, we need a little bit of it. And I'm just raising a voice from one of our developers, Wilson Drake Developers, who's been extremely successful at using tax abatement program to bring high quality rental units into neighborhoods, affordable to neighborhood residents that really meet the need of the working people in North and West and Northwest Philadelphia. And they used the tax abatement program was a critical part of their financial stack. The loss of that program has really destroyed their model, and it would take away a very valuable service or provider. Do you support a targeted tax abatement program for construction or renovation of housing that's affordable to the median income in underserved neighborhoods? Yes or no? And then you could, expanding on that response.
Yes, I do. I think that tax policy, of which the tax abatement is a part, is meant to be strategic. And the city, when the city put the tax abatement into effect in, I guess it was the early 90s, it was to serve a purpose for development in our city. I think we have to look at things differently right now, and a tax abatement for affordable housing, a tax abatement in certain neighborhoods. I mean, my office as city controller looked at the profitability of projects across the city by zip code to see where it was necessary to actually get profitability. And there are definitely neighborhoods that you need the tax abatement in. There are neighborhoods that you need the tax abatement and it's still not profitable. So we might, and this gets to, if we're really going to be intentional around tax policy, some neighborhoods likely wouldn't have the abatement. Other neighborhoods might have an expanded abatement. We need to be intentional around affordable housing. So I absolutely would support that. I also think that something tied into historic preservation would be helpful as well, because a lot of our housing stock is older, and just to make sure we don't lose it completely with rebuilds, with knockdown and rebuilds. I think that's another area that we could be intentional around tax abatement, tax policy for.
Great, thank you.
Very much. So I'm going to encourage, let's say, Amani, Brittany, Lorraine, Steve, if you have any questions, please add them into the chat. But I have a question, and I'm basically thinking out loud. So the city is very bifurcated. There are a lot of fiefdoms. There are a lot of people setting in their ideologies in terms of what's right. How will you, should you become the next mayor, bring people under an umbrella to work together moving forward? And I will add to that, city employees, having that experience, seem to be particularly exhausted, devalued, and have a morale challenge. So like, how could you speak to, as mayor, like, how do we bring everyone into a shared space of moving forward?
So bringing people together is something that I've done a lot of. I do have the skill to talk to people with very different viewpoints and be able to pull them into the same room. It's something that I've done with several projects as city controller, with my office's investigation into the civil unrest following George Floyd's murder. I created a community council with people with very different views, from small business owners to retired police officers to Black Lives Matter activists, to all get together. And it wasn't always easy, let me tell you that. But my goal is let's understand our shared humanity here, and that we all have to move forward in a way that is collective for our city and together. So what I say that I have the ability, I talk to business owners, I have good relationships with business people, as well as people that are much more sort of grassroots, more left leaning. And to me, it's about bringing people together. I mean, I brought Mayor Nutter and Mayor Streep together. That to me is something that we absolutely need to do. And I've also worked with different council members and others in the political sphere over the years. When I worked for Mayor Nutter, I had a good working relationship with Council President Clark, and I often was in the council president's office talking about this or that. And then, I would sort of go back and forth because they didn't get along. So that is something that I've done in the past. And city workers just need they need a mayor and a leader that is invested in them right now, and that says, we are going to do this. You know, our city employees, you know, from my experience, they're great. They want to do the right thing. They love working for the city. They're just so frustrated right now and so demoralized that, you know, to be able to, you know, as mayor, I'll say, okay, we're going to do this. We're great. We're Philly. I'm going to help you. We're going to get this done. We're going to get through this. Yes, we're going to need to make changes. Yes, this won't always be easy, but we're in this together. I've got your back. We're going to, you know, make some changes, of course, but we have to move forward. So that's the way I would look at it.
Rebecca, can we have you for about 5 extra minutes? We started a little
Yes.
late.
Yes, and now, yes,
Questions
absolutely.
in the chat. And the first one from Lorraine Wilson Drake, who is one of our developers. Any thoughts on zoning policy? We could use a lot of the housing stock to bring more units if we didn't have to go through the arcane zoning practice. Any thoughts on how zoning policy can be changed to encourage the kind of development and affordability that we need?
So on zoning, the short answer is yes. I think that we do need to look at zoning and look at it in a holistic way. It's often done very piecemeal, especially in the last few years, council district by council district. I think we need a much stronger citywide plan on zoning, and the zoning board, I've seen how delayed it's gotten. So I think that is an area and that of improvement that's needed. And I would look to people that know this the best, that have experience dealing with it, such as this group, to truly to get your feedback, to say what needs to change here and how in your view would you fix this, and then go from there. I would want your feedback to do that.
Great. Now we do have another question in the chat. How would you view the city's pension plan playing a role in meeting the housing challenge?
That's an interesting one. So the pension plan obviously has investments. And so if the question is around how do we use the pension plan's investments in the housing challenge, that might be the gist of the question.
Yes.
It's interesting because, you know, there's very strict pension plan. I was on the pension board as city controller, has very strict rules around what it can invest in, and it has to be over a certain size. Because I had started to think of this idea around pension plans. So there's this rule that you can't invest in sort of smaller projects. It has to have a certain asset size to invest in it. But I started talking to the then mayor of LA, Eric Garcetti, and a few others about this. We were all part of this group called Accelerator for America. What if cities pooled assets to invest in our pension plans, to then invest in our cities? I know this sounds sort of strange, but like basically cities grouping together to form a bigger pot of money to then invest in our underserved businesses, housing in our underserved neighborhoods. So then we would have more ownership and care of that, of those assets. That conversation, you know, everyone was saying why it couldn't work. I'm still interested in how it could work. But that's something I think to be continued. One thing that I'm concerned about in pension plans in general is the investment that I'm recently concerned about is the investment in housing private equity and the negative impact that private equity is having in housing in cities across our country, including Philadelphia. And is there a connection? I was told not in Philadelphia's pension plan, but it's something that I am concerned about, that if our pension plan's investing in private equity for strong returns, I would not want that to be the same private equity that is really being negative with buying up properties in Philly and squeezing the rent and not caring for the buildings. So that's a little bit
that, Rebecca, because that's a concept that's a little new. I know I've read about it once, But that's like outside this, let's say a national company who's buying property here, they're like an absentee landlord almost.
Right.
They own the property, they may be doing rents, but it's no longer connected necessarily to that neighborhood, the
Right.
neighborhood needs, the neighborhood residents. And that's happening more and more,
Yes.
like house by house, that we don't even know it. We don't now
Right.
know necessarily locally owned or what property is not locally owned in our own neighborhoods. Is that sort of?
Yes, that it is. There's a good report by Drexel's Bruce Katz on this, and I could send it to you, Sandra or Taib, because it's basically demonstrating the percentage of housing stock that outside owners, national owners are buying in neighborhoods in cities across the country, packaging them together. They're owned by a private equity company, so they raise the rents and then basically do not care for the property in the way that is necessary. So don't make the improvements, but they're making double-digit returns. And so the investors in the private equity get that juiced up return, but it's like ravaging cities, including Philadelphia. And this is something that I'm concerned about. And obviously I think we all should, but when I heard about it, I was floored because this is something that we have to stop. It's predatory.
Yes.
And we have to stop it. And we have to make sure that there in no way that cities through their pension plans are not actually investing in this to get this return. So that's just, something that is on my mind.
Yeah, please send us that information.
Okay.
That's, again, that we need to be paying attention to. There's so many pieces to this that for us to be really constructive in this space, needed to understand these different dynamics that are at play. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
I know
sure.
we've come up against the clock. So wanted to give you a chance for like a 2-minute closing after we've kind of peppered you with questions, any closing comments that you may have. And
Sure. So thank you for the opportunity for this conversation. I truly appreciate it. I mean, I'm running for mayor because I believe I'm really the right person to lead the city forward, that I have that right experience and courage and vision to put our city back on track, to have it be safer and cleaner, to fix the education system, and also make our city more equitable. And this has been an area that I've done a lot of work on as city controller, to call it out and to chart a path forward, that there is this inequity still in service delivery, in Black-owned business percentage, in home ownership, in income level, that as mayor, I want to be part of the solution, to be a leader, to change the trajectory of this in a way that we can say that we're moving away from this status quo into a future that's more equitable and has more opportunity for everyone in Philadelphia, which means fixing the racial inequity that exists in our system. So whether that's through development, whether that's through zoning, whether that's through business creation, education, service delivery, trash pickup, 911 time, all of it. I want to fix it. I want to work with you to fix it. I love our city. We have an amazing city. We need the right mayor. So I hope to gain your support and work with you. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
definitely
Thank
appreciate
you.
the time. Thank you. And remember the Growth Collective, we will be here.
Wonderful.
Throughout it all. So we hopefully have an opportunity to work with you if you're successful in being mayor or wherever your ventures are, because a lot of the things you mentioned are the kinds of things we care about. And so I want to thank our collective members as well and just give them a shout out. Leslie Smallwood Lewis with Mosaic Development, Anthony Miles, TPP Holding, Anthony Fillard with West Powelton Development, Kyle Easley and Brahim Murray with BKP, Leon Caldwell, Ujima Developers, Lorraine Wilson Drake and Anthony Drake, Wilson Drake Developers, and of course, Taib Smith with Smith and Roller, and our advisors, Steve Lawrence, Imani Hamilton, Randall Drain, joining with Taib Smith, Stephen Sanders, and myself with the Growth Collective. This is a mission that's very important in Philadelphia. And so thank you for taking the time to talk with us about it.
No, Sandra, thank you so much. It's great to be here. Thank you, and look
Thank
forward
you.
to working with you more.
You too.
Absolutely.
Best of luck.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.